In this video, I want to talk to the people who have burnt out numerous times in their employee position. And because I've done that 4 times in my life and I've done it really hard. And each time in these employee positions, there were certain aspects of employee life that really started to just grate on me. And so I want to list my top 8 for you because I think sometimes you might not even notice what's grating on you or what is irritating. Some of them are probably maybe obvious or like your top 3. But I want to list my top 8 and see if you resonate. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to explain why it's important. And if you do resonate, you know, what that might mean for you. So I also want to note my very low production moment here. So we just moved into a house sit today. If you don't know, we are house sitters and we do this quite frequently. And we've been here many times at this house, and it's lovely, lovely cat owner. They have 3 cats. They're lovely. And there's just not a great place to set up for video filming. Right now, I'm actually in front of their front window, but due to the sun is coming through, as you can see in my glasses, but I also have the shade there because the house across the street has a lot of white on it. So it almost comes in so intense. But then there's also a light right above me that's like too much. Overhead lighting is just like the worst. So I've like rigged 2 mini lights here. She doesn't have, well, she works up in her bedroom, so I never work up there. I always work down here at the dining room table. So all of that to say, this is all still very on brand for me. As you know, if you've watched my videos, I'm a very low production gal when it comes to the video editing side of things. But as a consumer of YouTube, I'm someone who listens to YouTube kind of while I'm doing things, while I'm cooking, doing laundry, exercising. I have YouTube on a lot. I usually 1.5 it, I speed it up, and I'm just listening. So feel free to do that with any of my videos, because really for me, this channel is not about what it looks like. It's not about the, aesthetic background, although I would love to have one someday. But it's really about me sharing my personal experience with you. It's about the content, right? And the experience and the sharing. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that. I know this is not my usual backdrop in my apartment and it's not ideal, but it's the best I could do this morning. And also this morning is the only time this week I have to film. So we're doing it, and I trust that the content will still be valuable to you. So going into my top 8 things I could not handle in employee life. And I want to clarify, back then I probably did blame for a while the actual institutions or businesses I worked for. But looking back, it's not so much, the nonprofit or teaching or the food industry. Those are 3, of the 4 places, for example, that is a problem necessarily. I think for me, the problem was just the status of being an employee, the W-2 reality, right? So, or even being an EA. When I was an executive assistant, I was a W-2 employee. So for me, it's more about the status or state of being an employee. And then some of it has to do with the position, but it was never the business's like fault. I think someone else could easily go into any of those positions that I have been in and probably do fine and be okay. And like these things would not bother them as much as they bothered me, so much so to leave, right? So yeah, I want to just clarify that. This isn't any one business's fault. This is just employee life that I really hated. So the first thing that would be one of the biggest things for me would just be the environmental overstimulation. So whether that was being a teacher, being in a classroom, the noise, the constant noise, the overhead lighting, or I was at a front desk many times, the phone, I'm talking to someone live, but the phone is ringing and I'm also responsible for the phone. So phone, hold, talking to the person, this, that, and the other thing, lights, noise of just ambient conversations happening. For someone who is a highly sensitive person, as I am, noise is kind of one of my biggest struggles because as a highly sensitive person, we don't filter out ambient noise very well. So we are the people, many of us, who like if we're in a room that's quiet, we can hear the modem humming in like the next room and it bothers us. And when we're in a restaurant, for example, it's hard to filter out like the music and the ambient conversations and like hear the person in front or next to you. We don't have like that whatever is in our audio system is not as correctly tuned as a normal person's audio system. So it's like it all comes in at full force and it's very overwhelming. So the noise factor for me of being either in an office or, in classrooms all day or in the food industry, right? When there's just, there could be a rush time, lots of people, music on, etc. All of that was a lot. Also, overstimulation of just peopling all day. Even though I loved a lot of my coworkers who I worked with, when I worked at the art center, I had great friends there, great instructors. As a teacher, there were some really, nice people who I enjoyed getting to know over the years, like fellow teachers, but I can't people all day. I just can't. I can fake it for a while, but it drains me too much. So that whole thing would be number one, environmental stimulation, all of that, the energy of the other people, the noise, the lights, all of that. My ideal work situation is this: in a home, silence, my only company being cats or like Nate, because he's also really quiet. So that's it. My second challenge of being an employee would just be having to be on all day. So again, the two best examples of this would be being a teacher when I was a teacher for 4 years and working at the nonprofit when I was at the front desk. You're on all day, as a teacher, except for like your lunch period. And even in my case, sometimes I had my lunch, I shared a room. I taught Spanish. So I shared a room with a fellow kind of specials teacher. So I would be eating my lunch, but she would be teaching, I think it was like accelerated math or something. She had like a special math course in our classroom. So I wasn't even alone then a lot of the time. And it was fine, but it wasn't fine. It wasn't ideal. Um, and at the art center, you're just always chatting with people. There's just so many interesting people. I love the people I worked with at the art center. I love the instructors. They would come in, I would get to see them. They're all so cool. The ceramics instructor, metals, glass art. I loved these people. And, having to engage with them at any point in the day when they may just be passing by is exhausting. It's exhausting. And it's not anything against them. It's just how my system is. And so for me, I wanted, and I've said this in other videos, I wanted my best energy to be saved for my like personal relationships. Not that some of them were not, some of those people were in my like closer knit group, but I didn't want to be giving it all out of work. So as introverts, as highly sensitive people, we only have so much social juice to give. And I did not want to keep having to give it at a workspace and then have like nothing left when I was not working, So, um, yeah, being on all day was just a no. I need to be home like this. And, even now as a VA, I tend to not have a lot of live meetings. I try not to have them. I only have them at the request of the person who hired me. And even then, like once a month is probably good, if that. Most of my clients, I do not even have to meet once a month. We just have a good working relationship. We only meet if there's like some big new project or something specific, So, I don't even like live meetings like that. So, and I hate the phone. I still hate the phone. So yeah. Yeah. And I had a W-2 position as an intake coordinator, which was literally answering the phone of the therapy office. So again, how I did that for a year, I don't know, but I'm so glad I don't have to answer phones anymore. It got me to my executive assistant position, which I'm grateful for. Okay, number three, the third like pet peeve of being an employee would be having my schedule dictated for me. After being a nun, which we had a really strict schedule, literally the bell would ring at every change of the schedule, like wake up, breakfast, prayer, this, that, and the other thing, da, 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 da. It was always, changing, very strict schedule, changing by the bell. Um, School schedule's very strict also. And even just having like at the nonprofit, having 9 to 5, I was the main employee who had to be on site literally from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Other people didn't have such a strict schedule, but because I was the phones and the front desk, that was mine to own. And so I, after a while, the novelty of that nonprofit art center wore off, and I really hated having to go there every day from 9 to 5. I hated having to leave the house in the morning. I'm such a morning person. I love my solitude. I love working out, taking my leisurely time in the morning. And even though I could do that with a 9 to 5, I would just wake up really early because I can. Again, I've always been a morning person. I ended up hating even having to like get dressed and leave the house. Like I just hated that. And to this day, as a self-employed person, I also don't love having to go anywhere in the morning. Like I love just having a full day of work at home, kind of uninterrupted. I can work at my own pace, take breaks when I need to, eat something. It's like very spacious and leisurely, and I still get my all the work done, but it's at my pace, the pace of my body, my mind, what I need, things like that. Um, even in a school setting, you only have so much time, breaks between classes to use the restroom, which was stressful for me, especially as a woman. You have to take your lunch break at certain times in your schedule, whatever that ends up being. And then the same with working in food, you get breaks at certain times, for eating and stuff. And I think I have like a little flair of what's that called? Um, Darn, there's that thing where you hate being told what to do. Someone's gonna tell me in the comments, and I know this word, this phrase. Demand avoidance. I think I have that. Because anything that felt like I have to fall in line, this might have been like post-convent psychologically how I ended up, but I ended up really having aversion to any of that stuff. And another thing regarding this topic is PTO. I hated the concept. I loathe the concept of having to request time off from a boss and like kind of, parcel it out during the year. Like that just feels so suffocating to me. Um, and I hate that way. I feel bad for people who still have to do that. I Although they might not have the need for freedom that I have a very high need for freedom and spaciousness. So it might not bother everyone as much as it bothers me. But I just hated that. I hated feeling like I couldn't, if I needed to make a doctor's appointment on like a Wednesday afternoon at 1 o'clock because I like needed to get there, I'd have to take PTO for that. And that sucks. And vacations and all of that. Like yesterday would be a perfect example. I had to go to a funeral for a neighbor, and I was able to just email my clients and tell them I would be offline until 2 p.m. And then what happened was I got stuck where I was. I was near my mom's house, but I was stuck there because it started to torrential downpour and storm for like 2 hours. And so I essentially ended up not going to work that day because I couldn't get home to get back on my laptop. And so, yesterday was a wash essentially when it came to work. Thankfully, there was nothing urgent, but all I did was email my clients and say, sorry, da, 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 da. And it's great because A, they don't expect me to be online all the time because that's how I train them. That is literally how I am. But B, it's like to have that freedom of knowing, this is my business. I run the show. I'm not, my clients do not run my show. I love them. I respect them. I get my work done for them. I think they would all say that. And at the same time, when something like that happens, A, you need to go to a funeral, B, gets rained out, can't get back home, don't have your laptop, can't work, it's not the end of the world. Did I do anything that made me money yesterday? No, I didn't. But I still appreciate greatly the freedom to like not worry about it, because as an employee, that could make people freak out. So, yeah, having my schedule dictated, I could not do that. I also, I need breaks and spaciousness. Sometimes being a teacher or being in the nonprofit, it's like working those first 3 to 4 hours straight or back to back classes for 3 to 4 hours, or just being at the desk from, 9 to 1 on for 4 straight hours. That's a lot. I never worked that long right out of like through. The most I would work in like one sitting now is probably 2 hours, and that's long. I usually work 1 to 2 hours and then I'm breaking. I'm going to get a coffee or a yogurt, rest my eyes, look outside, play with the cats, anywhere from 10 minutes to like 45 minutes if I'm taking a full like lunch making tuna fish, whatever. So I need that spaciousness. And being a W-2, you don't really have that freedom. So that started to really grate on me. That was a long one. The fourth thing that really started to grate on me, or that I more so could not tolerate, were high demand or high urgency times. So this is more like at the front desk or working in food. I collapse when there is a lot of things happening at once, people coming at me, like the phone's ringing, there's a line at the desk, there's an issue that's taking more time than usual. I'm getting help, figuring a thing out, and the line just keeps growing, whatever, all of that is just, I usually end up just kind of collapsing, and I like can't function, like my brain can't function. Same with food, trying, I don't do well under pressure. I know some people and personalities work really well under pressure. That's like where they thrive. For me, people looking at me, people around, people demanding energetically things from me all at the same time. It's like I collapse. And so being in an environment, a work environment where um, that has potential to happen every day, really is not sustainable for me. It's not sustainable for me. And that's that. But that definitely happened numerous times at both of those positions. Less so as a teacher, because his classroom's kind of like a manageable, repeatable thing. But nonprofit and food, that can just go awry very quickly. um, Okay, the fifth thing that this was a big one. This was a big one. I think because the nuns, the convent really did it in for me with this one. But I think a lot of employees suffer from this. And that would be things added to my plate where I wasn't given a choice, and I also was not compensated more. Do you want to hear that again? I'm sure I'm not the only one. Right? So things added to your plate every year, every quarter. When someone leaves, you absorb their work, right? And you're not really given a choice. Nobody asked you if you have the bandwidth, do you have capacity for this? And you're also not paid more for taking on these extra responsibilities that you didn't sign up for the day one when you signed your contract, right? So this first started happening. I'm not going to go into convent stuff because I was just like a Looney Tunes, and there was zero boundaries with any of this as a nun. But as a teacher, I noticed in the Catholic school system anyway, it was like every year as the new year started, there would be one or two little extra things, little extra requirements of our time, like another recess duty or another whatever. Like, in a school, this is grade school, you had like morning duty, afternoon duty, or recess duty, I think. And so it was like a few more of those each year, plus taking on this, that, and the other like school event responsibility, kind of really without being asked. It was like, this is just what we're all doing. And, as an employee, you're kind of like, well, I guess I can't say no, I guess, because if I say no, maybe they'll fire me. And also, I'm not getting paid for this used to be like a free period, but now I have to go and do recess, I guess. And it just sucks. It feels very being taken advantage of. And then the same with the art center. I mean, if you've worked in nonprofits, this is just, I feel like they get such a bad rap, but like this is just how they go because they have like many jacks of all trades as employees for a reason because they try not to, they try to keep costs down essentially, which I get. But as an employee, you have to be really careful because it can be a really slippery slope. Um, and in the nonprofit I worked for, you know, I the way I looked at it was my job was 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and anything out of those hours, I did not sign up to do. And so eventually, there were some events and things that was like staff was expected to be there. For the first few years, I would go, but I think the last year I didn't go because I was like, A, getting very close to burning out. And B, I was like, you know what? If no one explicitly says this is mandatory, Kelly, you have to be there. It was this evening event. I'm not going because there are people who worked there who didn't have to be there 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. They had more flexible schedules than my position did. And so I just felt like it was a little unfair. And I was like, yo, I am not doing this. I already do plenty. I'm close to burning out. Like I didn't show up. And it was fine. Nobody said anything to me, but that was also my last year. And I was like, I'm out. But things like that really bother me. Or like I've heard in other businesses where like somebody leaves, somebody resigns or is fired and they just don't replace that person. I've had that happen with people in my family. I hear it all the time. The person is not replaced, and instead the business thinks it's a great idea. Oh, let's just divvy out these responsibilities to our current employees and they'll just absorb them and not complain. And it's like, you suck. Stop doing that. Stop doing that. Don't do it. And if you're going to do it, at least ask, be mindful, and say, hey, we're thinking of not rehiring such and such a position. These are the tasks they had. Does anyone have bandwidth to take on any of this? And if you do take on XYZ or up to 3 projects or tasks or whatever, you will get compensated XYZ for the extra work that you're doing above and beyond the role you were hired for. Like that's how it should be. Volunteer. Okay, maybe someone does have the bandwidth. Maybe their role is kind of slowing down and they're like, yeah, I could use the extra work and the extra money. Cool. That's like fair. People do it the other way. This is why I hate a lot of the corporate America because it's that way. And like, they don't even ask you. You just absorb, absorb, absorb. And then people wonder why there's so much turnover. It's because you suck. Stop doing that. People don't have the bandwidth, but you also force feed it to them and they don't have a choice. They think they're going to lose their job if they say no. So it just sucks. So that really really boils my blood. Is that the phrase? I feel like I always want to say a phrase and it's like never really coming to me. Okay, 3 more. These ones are shorter and sweeter, but they're still very relevant. And again, sorry for the lighting. As I said in the beginning, tricky lighting situation here in this house, but it's about the content, not about the aesthetics. Okay. Another thing I realized, especially being a VA, especially at the art center where I was at the front desk after a few years, was I can do this same type of work on my own and charge much more. So that also was a huge thing to me. Sure, as a self-employed person, you do have to pay self-employment tax and other things, but I will say it still feels better to work for myself and charge much more. This is both at the art center and then even when I was an EA to what I charge now as a VA doing less intensive work, I charge almost twice what I was making as an EA employee, right? An executive assistant sounds like a very higher paying position, but now I do essentially less I would say it's like less important work in the sense of like, I'm not an EA for anyone anymore, right? I'm a VA for multiple people, but because I'm so seasoned, I do excellent work. I don't need to be micromanaged, all these things. I can charge a higher rate for being a VA, and I do. And so once I started to realize, and then this was even at the art center, it was like, I think I was getting paid the equivalent of 14 something an hour to be the front desk for a huge nonprofit art center that had thousands of students in their database and, I don't know, probably 50 to 75 instructor, the whole nine. And I was like, I do a lot here. And I'm sure I could funnel that into being a VA for one person and charge at least 20 bucks an hour. And that's exactly what I did. My first VA client, and essentially ended up starting at $20 an hour as a VA. Now that was in 2019. Now it's 2026, and I work usually within the range of 40 to 42 an hour as a VA, and that's my baseline. That's normal. So that also was a huge thing. I was like, why am I working for someone else at a lower rate? It just doesn't make sense. Number seven, yeah, the last two. Okay, number seven is something I also really started to hate doing towards the end, was time tracking for someone else. And I guess the last two are almost kind of related, so I'm going to put them together. So clocking in, time tracking for someone else, and adjacent to that is feeling like half of my working time, if I had to work, let's say, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, or when I was an EA, I had to hit 25 hours a week. I felt like a lot of that time, or like, I don't know, a third of that time was just being a warm body and doing busy work, right? Because I can get done the essential stuff that needs to get done in a short amount of time. And then the rest of it felt like just sitting at the front desk, doing nothing, doing busy work. I mean, and then the same with being an EA. Usually it was like on Friday, I was like, do I really have to find 5 more hours of stuff to do? There's really nothing burning. And sure, I can keep doing work to get ahead and to get ahead and to get ahead, but there's only like so much um, busy work of getting ahead. I'm just plugging in my computer here. That you can do. And I just felt like it was like sometimes really stretching to get to some kind of work I could do to land at my 25 hours a week, or to finish out my week, the 9 to 5, right? And it was like, and I think that is so true for a lot of employees who have to work a certain amount of hours. It's like you're probably done your actual work halfway or 3/4 of the way through your week, right? And like this is where like I think the 4 hour work week comes in and stuff. I mean, and this is how I work today. I only work as a VA 20 hours a week, if that, because that is that I get it all done. Whereas if I was a VA W-2 for like a business, they might need me for 40 hours a week, but like I guarantee you I can get that work done in way less time. So I hated feeling like I just had to be a warm body in a seat and like hit a certain amount of irrelevant hours. It's just so stupid, I think. And this isn't, again, about the business owners, the nonprofit. This is not about that. It's just, to me, the traditional way the work system is set up, the 40-hour work week, the insurance, the PTO, it is just not fitting for so many of us. And I think it's a lot of it is just an eye roll. So I just, that is it. Those are my 8. But so all of that to say, those 8 things, over time really started to grate on me. I'm sure there's more, but those are my top 8. But I'm saying this to you because if you resonate with a lot of these things, if you're like, yes to a lot of them, or most of them, or all of them, it's likely, it would behoove you, if you haven't already, to, I just want to check something. Yeah. To, look into being a highly sensitive person. Take the highly sensitive person quiz and or look into being autistic. And I would say I'm definitely an HSP. I usually test off the charts. I've taken that quiz multiple times in my life, and I'm usually a 26 out of 27. Yeah, like yes. So I know I have always identified that way. And I also learned about being an HSP way before all of this more recent kind of online sharing about autism was happening, maybe within the last like 10 years. I learned about being an HSP probably back in like 2011, 2012. So that was a long time ago. And that was my first, oh, this is why I am how I am. And a lot of it still tracks. I know there's a lot of crossover between some HSP traits and traits of autism in somebody. And I do think I have qualities of autism for sure. There's a good amount of them. But when I do these online tests, now the online tests for autism are not diagnostic tests. Listen, I've worked for a therapy office since 2020. I know the difference. I'm like, I've even like watched and listened to trainings on that the therapists have to go through for this stuff. But I will say, when I take the online quizzes for autism, which are informal quizzes, while there are definitely some yeses for me, there's definitely some no's. Like that is absolutely no, that doesn't track at all. And that's pretty consistent. So I do think I'm like probably on the autism scale or have some traits of it. I don't think I'm full out, but I do know I'm full out HSP. So I do identify more that way with like a sprinkle of autistic traits. But either way, I think it's worth, and if you've never heard of being highly sensitive, it is not like a DSM, mental health thing, although I think it should be included in more like therapy talk. It is definitely a thing. And it's been researched and there's evidence and all this stuff. It's worth reading the book, The Highly Sensitive Person, taking the quiz, kind of doing some research on it. Because when I learned that I was highly sensitive, it really helped put my life experience into the right lens. It wasn't like something's wrong with me. Why am I not like everyone else? Why do I keep burning? Even though I'm highly capable, I was like a great student. I'm a quick learner. I'm great with people. Why do I keep burning out at work? Why do I keep having to leave these wonderful places that I believe in the mission? I love the people. It seemed to be like, a place I could thrive. And yet I keep leaving. And it's not because something's wrong with me. It's because I could not sustain that environment. Why could I not sustain that environment? Because I'm highly sensitive, because I cannot do that much stimulation for more than 3 or 4 years at a time. And that was pretty right on. I was a teacher for 4 years. And then, well, the juice burrito bar was always kind of a transitional job, but I only lasted there for 6 months. And then the art center, I only lasted there for 3 years. So, and then being an employee after that, part-time was much better. And then I became self-employed. I guess I was employee part-time for 4 years, first an intake coordinator, then an assistant, executive assistant. And then I was like, peace out. I'm doing this. I'm doing my own thing full time, essentially. So I say this because I think it's worth knowing. I think it's worth investigating. And also, if you are any of these things, if all of this does track for you or most of it, it's really worth looking into figuring out an alternative work-life situation for yourself, because you're not going to be able to sustain a normal 9 to 5 in many cases. Like what I did a lot of my life until I was self-employed. So from when I left the 9 to 5 until 2024, when I was fully self-employed, I did both. I had a part-time W-2, which was so much better. That was my job as an intake coordinator, and then as executive assistant, it was 25 hours a week. And then I was house sitting and I was coaching. So I kind of would mix those together, and it was so much better for me. So maybe for you, the pivot is just don't be a full-time employee, be a part-time employee and do a side gig. And I know then everyone's like, oh, insurance, this, that, and the other thing. That's a whole nother thing. I mean, I am a low earner always. And so I can get insurance at a pretty low rate. So, insurance is something to figure out. I get it. But all I'm saying is there are ways to bring in income that are not just a 9 to 5. And you can get very creative with that. So and you're probably going to be happier and more regulated when you do that. Because the 9 to 5 just sucks the life out of you. And what's the point of like having a life if you're just going there and like literally like giving your lifeblood for 40 hours a week, coming home and like dying? It's not worth it. It's worth figuring out the other details, the part-time, the side gig, the insurance. It's worth doing the conglomerate of other things so that you can have your life back, have some spaciousness, um, you know, have some more enjoyment back and feel the buoyancy that is not being constantly drained and burned out, right? So, yeah. That's my riff on all those things. So let me know down below if I missed anything. Let me know which ones you resonated with. I would love to hear like some of your icks and aversions when it comes to being a W-2 employee. And if you have started a side gig yet, or are going to, and how it's going. Okay, bye for now.